Hello, welcome to Hope Baptist Church. My name's Luke, I'm the pastor of the church here, and today I'm joined by my friend Barry Woodward, who has come down from Manchester, and Barry's going to tell us a little bit today about his story and about the hope that he found some years ago and what he does now. So Barry, why don't you just start by introducing yourself and telling people who are watching a little bit about you.
Okay, Luke, well, my name's Barry Woodward, and I was born in Manchester. And when I was at school, I didn't bother doing any work. I just messed around. I left school with no qualifications whatsoever. And I met three people who were taking drugs. They were smoking weed, taking amphetamines, and using LSD. And that seemed really like I fancied a bit of that. So I started to hang around with these three lads, and I started to take the same drugs they were taking. And we were taking these what we call now recreational drugs for quite a while. And then it was a Friday night. I'll never forget when I took heroin for the very first time. And for me, that was the worst choice that I'd ever made. So within no time, we was taking heroin every single day. But if you'd have said to me or any of my mates, are you guys addicted? We'd have said, we're not addicted, we can handle it, we're in control. But often the thing that you think you're in control of, if you're honest with yourself, has got control over you. So I was good at living in denial. I kidded myself for a long time that I wasn't addicted, but I was. And one thing led to another. I ended up becoming a drug dealer in Moss Side, Manchester. And I got onto this treadmill really of having to commit crime to pay for the drugs that I was addicted to. And throughout a number of years, I was involved with all different kinds of crimes. I ended up in prison several times and I'd done a few sentences. I remember coming out from one sentence and I just wanted to celebrate getting out of prison, Luke. I was just so happy to be free. And I ended up going on this bender which lasted 9 months. I didn't sleep for 9 months. I just take amphetamines every day. I was taking methadone and heroin and smoking weed and some other prescription drugs that I'd get from my doctor, but it was amphetamine that kept me awake. And I'd just sit up all night making music, with the music blasting out. And after 9 months, I started to hear voices. And I turned the music down. I remember saying to my girlfriend, can you hear those voices, Lee? She said, no, Dad, it's all in your head. Don't you tell me it's all in my head. You're one of them, aren't you? And I thought she was conspiring with these voices against me. And I lost all my confidence. I was a typical working class Manchester lad. I lost all my confidence. I wouldn't go outside the front door. I was frightened. I think some people would call it like extreme anxiety. I was very anxious about everything. I started taking the amphetamine, but these voices didn't go away. So eventually I went to see a doctor and the diagnosis was amphetamine psychosis, and he sent me to Chiro Psychiatric Hospital. And I'll never forget that day. We were going down Princess Parkway in the back of a private hire taxi, and Lisa sat with me on the back seat, and it was raining, and the water was splashing up the side of the wheel arches, and in the sound of that water, I could hear voices. I'm thinking, they're following me to Cheadle. These voices, they're following me. Cheadle Road was the lowest point of my life. I mentioned I've been in jail a few times, and I've been in a padded cell in jail. I've been in a padded cell in a straitjacket in jail after I had a fight in one jail. I've been in solitary confinement in jail, but the worst place I've ever been was there, because now I was out of control. These voices were in control. I lived with those voices for 9 years. It was hell on earth. And then I ended up going to a church, and I met three people. All of them were Christians, and I went to it wasn't my kind. These guys were all dead friendly. They were coming up to me. Are you all right, love? I'm so glad that you're in. Thinking, why are you glad that I'm here? You don't even know me. Where's your handbag? I mean, that was what I was thinking like in those days, you know. But people were so friendly, and they made me feel really welcome. And I'm thinking, why are they being so nice to me? I'm a drug addict. I inject drugs, you know. But they were really nice to me, and that spoke volumes. And on that day, the guy was speaking, and he gave people the opportunity to be prayed for. And I thought, what have I got to lose? And I went to the front and I got prayed for, and I had an epiphany. And that became the massive turning point in my life. That was 24 years ago now, Luke. And the thing is, I often say when I speak in prisons, and I've wrote a book called Once an Addict, and this makes that point as well. I was changed 24 years ago, and I'm still changed. Only God can do that. Some people change in the amount of a year or 2 years, and I tip my hat to people who have a go and do that. But for me, every year that I get older, everybody's getting older, of course they are, but for me, it's another year that I've stayed changed, where I can say, that's God. I was changed, and I'm still changed 24 years later.
That's amazing. So after that moment where you kind of met Jesus at that church, what actually happened after that? What, in terms of your life now, what do you do now?
Oh, wow. A lot of things changed. I had to be intentional about changing some things because I'd made the decision to become a Christian, and I had an experience in that church. It was an experience. It's not always the case with everybody, but for me, it was how it was, and that's it. But then I had to start to make right choices. I started to think about the choices, calculate the choices that I was making, where in the old days I wasn't. I was just being reckless. Then I started to think about the choices that I was making. But I would say within 4 weeks after me going to that church for the first time, I had an overwhelming sense that God's got a plan for me. There's a reason for all of this. There's got to be a reason. Why have I been through all of that? I can use that in a positive way. That God can take my mess and turn it into a message. That He can take my negative experiences and use them in a positive way. And that was like so, like, whoa, He can use me even. Because God's not fussy, is He?
Absolutely.
Good job, isn't it?
Yeah,
There's nobody
absolutely.
there. He's not fussy. And that was a real, like, God's got a plan for me life. And that I'm forgiven and I can have a new start. And that was like the driving force, knowing God and having this drive. And it became clear that God had called me to be an evangelist. And I didn't know what an evangelist was. And I remember ringing my first pastor. I said, I've had 2 pastors in my 24 years. And Alan was the guy who got me going, the first one. And I said, Alan, God's called me to be an evangelist. But what's an evangelist? Because I didn't know. It just proves that God had called me to be an evangelist. And I worked out that an evangelist is someone who communicates the Christian message in a language that people can understand so they can respond themselves. And that became my purpose in life. I went off to a Bible college, a Methodist Bible college called Cliff College. In those days, they still do a bit to do, well, they do a lot to do with missional stuff, but in those days they were training evangelists. And I went to Cliff College and started training. And then in my final year, I set up Proclaim Trust. 1999, I graduated, and on the day of my graduation, I became the CEO of Proclaim Trust. We had £20 in the bank then. We've still got £20 in the bank. Well, we've probably got a bit more than that now, but that was the beginning of what I'm doing now. So what I do now, I always work alongside local churches, never outside of the local church, because I believe the evangelist is a gift for the church. He or she should always work through the local church. So I come here. I'm going to be coming back next year. I've been here this year. And so that I always work through local churches. And also we work in prisons. I speak at about 30 prisons events. And we always work through the chaplaincies in prisons. There are occasions when a secular organisation within a prison will ask me to come in and do something that's probably not got the Christian thing, but it's more of a motivational thing. And I'll do that as well. And I always talk about my faith, but generally it's always through the local church. So it's doing outreach events. And I've been doing that for 24 years now. But my focus is the UK. And I believe that, missionaries, we send missionaries to different countries, and I get that. But for me, my mission field is the UK. So I'll go anywhere in the United Kingdom. I've even said no to some really, really glamorous places as well. My wife's not happy about that. But yeah, it's just me trying to be integral with what God's called me to do. So I'm a missionary to the UK, speaking a language that people in the United Kingdom can understand. That's my niche, really.
Amazing. So I guess, like us as a church, we haven't met as a congregation since March now. Your diary must have got very, very empty very quickly when coronavirus started.
In one sense, yes, because my diary is always at least a year in advance booked. So you can't just book me for next week. You have to, as you know, we always plan a year ahead. You give or take a few months. And that's always been the case for, well, at least for the last 10 years. So when lockdown happened, all the events that I had planned, I was due to go to Aberdeen to do a big weekend with a big church up there and spend the weekend with them. I've been going to them for every 18 months now for the last 7 years. That got postponed, and events started to get postponed. But what happened then is a lot of last minute online event invites came in. Barry, can you do an online presentation? So yes, I went through, it just so happens this morning, I keep a record of everywhere that I've spoke since it started. I've got a record from right at the beginning of the message that I used and the date I was there, just to keep an eye on things. And I was just updating my recent speaking engagements. Although I've not been to an actual venue, except for this one, to do something online, and I was in a church 2 weeks ago doing something on. That's the first 2 church visits that I've done. I've visited my own church to do something in-house, social distancing online. But so I've probably done more online events than what I would have done if I'd have been on the road. But obviously, it's took less of my time, because if I'm travelling throughout the UK, I can be in Scotland one week, I can be down here the next week, I can be in, Northern Ireland a couple of weeks. So I've been doing everything from my home office, which I've turned into a part studio as well. So I can, like this, basically, I can film content. I can plan that in. So it's easier to do. So I think we've just adapted, like all churches have. I know that you guys have adapted massively, and my church, my own church, has adapted massively. And I think as an itinerant guy, we've just made, because what we do, as a speaker, we can still produce that content, and churches like yourselves can still use it. So that's what we're doing for now, and we'll still keep doing that.
Yeah.
One exciting thing that has happened, Luke, is I should have been right now in London doing what I call my London prisons tour. I've done that for over 10 years. I should have been in Idown prison yesterday, and then I should have been in Downview prison next Sunday. I should have been HMP Send tonight. So they're the jails that I've done for years, the regular bookings. And I've not been able to get to those prisons, and I love my August, prisons tour, and other times of the year when I do things as well. It can be September. I love doing those events. So all of them, have been postponed, but I've been doing stuff online. So I've been recording content for chaplains to use. So on Sunday, one of my talks went out. In Scottish prisons, they're a bit more modern Scottish prisons than English prisons, most of them. They're very contemporary. So a chaplain can play a DVD and it goes out into all the cells. So one of my talks was streamed into all the cells on Sunday morning, 550 people. 2 weeks before that, HMP Glenorchy, another Scottish prison, another talk went out, and there's around 500 people in that prison as well. So the reach has been massive. When I go to speak in prisons in person, the groups are like 50 people, or I might speak to 2 lots of 50 people, or it might be 30 people. It's never about the size of the crowd, but it's the size of the crowd you can get together legally in a jail with the prison population, stroke how many prison officers are there and all of that. And then a few weeks before that, one of my talks went out on radio to 80,000 prisoners. So that's every prison in England and Wales. So I think of my reach, and it's not taking me long to record those talks in my little studio, but yet the potential reach has been massive during lockdown.
Yeah.
But we're gonna keep doing that.
Yeah.
We've had a conversation with a secular organisation that produce video content for prisons, and they want me to come in and do some stuff to do with the message of hope. Obviously they're not Christians, but we can work around stuff and bring our message in, and always communicate the message of Christianity, but do it in a creative way. So that's something we're going to be doing moving forward. So in a sense, lockdown, yes, my diary has emptied, but then it's been last minute bookings coming in, and then seeing how that could potentially change the way we do things moving forward. We'll always do events in churches and prisons, always, but this will be an add-on.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, for us as a church, one of the things that we've seen over this time is a number of people who would probably never step foot in our buildings connecting with us as a church. And I think the stats are something like, over lockdown, 1 in 4 people have been connecting with some sort of religious service online. So for you, just briefly, what would you say to maybe some people who are looking in and have never really considered Jesus before, and now beginning to think about these kind of things for themselves? How would you encourage them to maybe take a step forward in looking for Jesus?
Well, if you've been going online and looking at church services, you're obviously searching, and it starts with a search. If you look for him, you will find him. That's what it tells us in God's instruction. When we look for him, we'll find him. And if you've been dropping into services online, you can find him. You don't need to be in a church to find him. It's good to go. That's part of going to church, and when we're allowed to go to church, that's all part of it. But you can be sat anywhere. I met people who've become Christians sat in a prison cell. They've read my book, Once an Addict, and there's a prayer at the back of that book, and they've prayed that, and they've had an experience in a prison cell. You could be sat at home, you could be sat in a flat, you could be in a caravan, you could be anywhere. Wherever you are right now, just remember that God is outside your life and he wants to come in, but he's not a burglar. He was never going to try and break into your life. He's never going to try and break in through the back door or the side door. He'll only ever come in through the legal entry. And he waits for you to make a decision. He waits for you to open the legal entry. The legal entry to my house at home is the front door. The legal entry to your life is the front door, and he waits for you to open that door, and he waits for you to give him consent to come in. He's not going to rush you. He's not going to push you. He just stands there and he waits for you. So when you're ready, you can just ask God to come in and you'll see what happens.
Brilliant. Barry, thanks so much for joining us today. It's been great to catch up and to have a chat. Barry is going to be speaking online, doing one of his talks, and I would encourage you not only to tune into that, but to invite some other people to tune in with that as well. We're going to be giving you some details over the coming days about when that will be and what will happen, but it is well worth listening to, and it's well worth tuning into and inviting your friends to.